Alright, my name is Sean Fallon, and you're listening to episode 27, Deadwood. Welcome to From First to Last. Hello again, and welcome again. My name is Sean Fallon, this is From First to Last. Today my guest is the host of the wonderful podcast, The Pop Culture Case Study, David Hart. How are you today, David?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
No, of course, it's good. Your podcast's awesome, so I thought, okay, we'll get some of that talent on here, see what happens. And
Thank you very much.
Of course. Well, what TV show did you choose for us today?
TV show I chose after much going back and forth with shows that had already been chosen was HBO's Deadwood.
Awesome. Well, this is one that's sort of been on the cards for a while. Like, it's weird. Like, I think only the last episode I recorded was The Wire, and then obviously now Deadwood. Like, these are shows that sort of from the start I assumed people would dive on, but I think as well there was a little bit of intimidation of like, oh, this is a really good show. I don't want to not give it its full whatever. Like, I don't want to sell it short in any way, but
right.
Yeah, it's good that people are finally stepping up. So what is your experience with Deadwood?
So Deadwood is actually a show that I came to right after it kind of finished its run. Like, it was one of those shows, of course, I knew about and people were talking about and just never quite got around to it. So once the show finally ended, I went back and watched it because at that point I had HBO. Although now it's available on Amazon Prime for free. So if you want to watch it, it's readily available, which is awesome. And I went back and watched it. Like within about 30 minutes, I was totally hooked. And I think I just ran through the entire run of the show in probably about 2 weeks. So I went through, 36 episodes in a couple weeks. So it's definitely one of those that is easily bingeable.
Yeah, that's I did exactly the same thing. It was it had finished by the time I got into it. I was living in it was when I was living as living in Thailand, and I was teaching English, and there was in the night bazaar in Chiang Mai. They used to sell like knockoff box sets for TV shows.
Oh, nice.
So I just buy like whatever. I would just be like, oh, okay, what's this? Deadwood, Cowboys, Ian McShane. Yeah, cool, I'll take it. So I just bought that for $3 probably the whole thing. And yeah, like you say, I was like, okay, this could be pretty good. I'll see how this goes. And like 36 episodes like that. Just which
yeah,
it's mad because you do sort of see other shows that you kind of binge all the way through. Like I did that with, say, Lost. I binged a couple of years of that because it's cliffhangers and mysteries and stuff like that.
Right.
Whereas Deadwood is incredibly dense and quite slow and paced and just sort of...
Yeah, and I think you only get those cliffhangers, like maybe at the end of seasons, like you get one cliffhanger or one huge event per year. But the rest of it, I kind of read up a little bit about it. Each episode was supposed to take place in probably about the period of a day. So it is really dense and really focuses your attention. It's not one of those, it's like, what's next? What's next? I can't wait. It's more like getting lost in the language and lost in the world that Milch has created.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I think it's definitely comparable to, like we were saying before, to The Wire, in the sense of an interesting thing I sort of found watching it again today, how little, there's no hand-holding. It is very, very dense language and dense plotting and quite a lot of in this first episode, that whole scheme where you've got all of them persuading the guy to spend too much money on the gold claim. And you sort of watch that unfold, and you've got to just have your wits about you to see who's scamming who, and then obviously later on they get the thing where Swearingen's like, why the fuck did you think you could get this much money out of him? This has caused more problems, right? So you have like the scheme and the aftermath, and then the aftermath of the aftermath, and there's no point where someone says to you, oh, look over there, look what they're doing, because this guy's doing this, and you've got to have your hands you've got to have your eyes on it all the time.
Yeah, I think that you've hit on something that's truly great about this show is that it never disrespects you as the audience member.
Yeah.
It just throws you into the deep end. And I don't think that ever stops throughout the 36 episodes. It's not a show that is easy. It's not a show that you can watch passively. Like, you really have to be aware of what's going on. And even in that first episode, when we're getting all these introductions of all these characters, it never makes the mistake of going, this is Al Swearingen. He owns this. This is his background. Like, it just, you're like, no, you're just thrown in. And to the point where I think that's why Ian McShane is so great here, is that he keeps you on your toes as an actor too. I mean, there's a moment in one of the first episodes where you think like, oh, Al Swearingen, he's a nice guy underneath, and then he literally throws a prostitute almost through a wall, and you're like, oh, I don't even know what to think anymore. So I love that the show doesn't give you easy answers.
No, that's it. And it also gives you like you say, it's interesting in that first episode, because I was sort of expecting straight out of the gate, like, that Swearingen was going to be, you know, stone cold villain. Mm-hmm. But his introduction is when he's talking to Ellsworth, and it's very cordial, and Ellsworth's a great character. There is that sort of sense of, yeah, in real life, some people are utter baddies, but you can't be a villain all the time. You know, there are moments where he is just chilling out and having a drink with someone who he likes, you know, and who's giving him money, and it's like, yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
But then obviously straight after that, he's, you know, arranging for a body to be eaten by pigs, and straight after that, it's something else. But
right.
There is that humanity of like, yeah, you know, sometimes you've got to have a bit of downtime. You can't be, you know, a total bad guy every minute of the day.
Right. You can't just sit around twirling your mustache for 16 hours a day and then sleep and do it again. Like, and I like that we get a glimpse into the real Al Swearingen, although I don't think even by the end of the show we're totally sure who that is. And I think that's what makes him interesting, is we're always waiting for the other shoe to drop, and we're never sure which one it's going to be.
Yeah, because I think it's interesting sort of in the sort of TV landscape for the past, I'd probably say about 20 years now since, like, Sopranos. You do have so many of these, like, anti-hero characters, but the interesting thing I think that puts Swearingen a bit over the top of everyone else is he's not a character who starts off good and then becomes bad. He is just, like, stone cold bad from the start, but you never get that. I was sort of, when I was watching it, I was thinking of Tony Soprano. And I was thinking of Kevin Spacey in House of Cards. And, like, House of Cards is trash. And Kevin Spacey's character, I feel like I watched, like, 2 years of it and then I gave up. They do keep trying to sort of talk about why he is the way he is. You're like, no, fuck that. No one cares about that. You know, and that's the thing with Swearingen. It's like, no, this guy is a bad guy. And it would be fascinating to know why, but it doesn't matter. You just... His actions in the present are what matters at the moment.
Yeah, he's more like an anti-villain than an anti-hero. Like, I don't think there's anything remotely heroic about him. Like, sometimes he does things that end up good for people you care about, but that doesn't make him a hero in any sense. He's doing it for himself, and he's fully aware of that. And honestly, that's why I think in this show, I think Timothy Olyphant, although is not the most fun character, I think to me it's the most impressive performance in the show. Ian McShane is great, but you got to remember, like, he gets all the great lines. He gets all the great moments. Where Timothy Olyphant is playing this very stereotypical stoic Western sheriff hero, like, that you've seen 1,000 times.
Yeah.
And a lot of the work he has to do is nonverbal, because there are moments, there's probably about 2 moments a season where he just utterly explodes vocally. And it's always really effective, because for the rest of the time, it's all done in facial expressions. It's all done in body language. But I think you can always tell where he stands and what he's thinking, even if he only has like 10 lines an episode. So this was like kind of my introduction to really appreciating his work. And I think this transferred over to, you know, other TV shows that he's done, is playing the same type of character. But I just think he is excellent here and probably doesn't get enough credit, because I think Ian McShane is in the spotlight, and for good reason.
Yeah, no, that's very true of like Bullock's character, because it's so restrained, like you say, because it's awesome to have a character that you've got in your pocket, and you can just have him have like a big, because I think it's in the second season where he's sort of taken a lot of shit off Al for like the first year of the show, and then finally they just kick shit out of each other, don't they? And they like fall off the balcony and they're just fighting in the street.
Yeah, I think that's like the finale of season one, I think. And I remember that being so brutal. It was one of those brutal fights, like hand to hand combat fights I've seen on TV in my entire life. Like I remember just like feeling shocked by it and like almost not wanting to watch because it was just so brutal. And there's these two characters that you actually, for one reason or another, do like and do care about. And it's really interesting because if you watch just the first episode, you would think, oh, I'm going to be rooting for Bullock. Clearly, like Ian McShane's the bad guy, fine. But in that moment, you're not sure who you want to win the fight. And that is an impressive feat, like from a script writing perspective, from a directing perspective, and from an acting perspective.
Oh, yeah, no, 100%. Like, that is such an incredible feat to have. Like we say with Swearingen, just like a shamelessly villainous character, but almost. Because, I mean, there is something wonderful about, like, a good villain. You always want to... There is... Something I guess we'll talk about later when we talk about Hearst. Like, it's good to have a villain... There's, like... I guess there's different shades of villain. And Swearingen's one of those villains who you're like, oh, you villainous shit. But I hope you're in every single episode of this show and I'm secretly loving what you're doing. You know, whereas Hearst as a character, you're just like, oh, I want every single character on this show to put 2 bullets in this guy's back, you know.
Yes, exactly. And very strange to have that played by a likable character actor, like the guy who played Major Dad in the 80s, playing this ultra villain, like the villain that really makes you, I think, like you root for Swearingen the whole time, but not truly until these other villainous characters show up, like when Cy shows up and when Hearst shows up, then you're really rooting for Swearingen because you're like, yeah, it's almost like it's, to use like a sports metaphor, when you have a player on your favorite team who's just a jerk and does terrible things and everyone else hates him, but you get mad when other people hate him. It's like he's our jerk. Like that's how I feel about Swearingen. Like, no, he's okay because we've been with him the whole time. When these new villains come in, those are the ones that really deserve punishment.
Yeah, no, that's it. It's like it's like family. You know, it's like, oh, you know, yeah, my brother, my cousin's a dickhead, but you can't say he's a dickhead. You know.
Exactly.
No, I think, like you say, that is great writing, and it's something that I think you see that as well on Breaking Bad. Like they did that where once you'd sort of like run out of sympathy for Walter, they brought in Gus and they brought in the neo-Nazis, and it's like, okay, well, he's bad, but he's our bad. This guy's a different, unknowable bad. He needs to go, you know? And that sort of is very clever.
Yeah,
it's very interesting with. Timothy Oliphant. I don't know if you've watched his new show, the Santa Clarita Diet on Netflix.
Oh, no, not yet. He's, like, I'm not super interested in that show, but he's the reason that I would watch it if I were to watch it.
It's absolutely fascinating because the show is, like, it's a very funny comedy, but it's, you know, it's a half-hour sitcom, and he is... It's interesting because I'm watching it with my wife, who has never seen Justified, she's never seen Deadwood, and she's just loving it. And for me, it's like trying to watch... Malcolm in the Middle if all you've seen is Breaking Bad.
Yeah, that would be awkward.
Yeah.
That's like you're just waiting for him to like grow out the mustache and put on the hat the whole time.
Because he's just like intimidated by people, and I'm like, Bullock, just fuck him up, you know, just
right. You're better than this.
Yeah. But it's like, to put it in like kind of perspective, because when we were watching it, I'm saying to my wife, like my wife's Fiona, I was like, Fee, I'm enjoying it, but the character Timothy Oliphant played could be played by Patton Oswalt. You know, that's the sort of thing of like,
right.
You know, he could just be like some lovable character actor who's always on the peak, always on the brink of like utter panic. But he's done it really well. I mean, it's impressive to sort of watch. I watched an episode of that, and then I watched Deadwood, and you're like, Oliphant doesn't get as much credit as I think he deserves, and like you say, because I think Ian McShane sort of overshadowed him. But he's very good to have that range of, like, you know, a TV show where he probably had 100 lines of dialogue in every episode, in 36 episodes.
Right.
So this show where he's very much like running around, he's got to, like, you know, help Drew Barrymore kill the neighbors and stuff like that. But it's very interesting. Well, talking about the first episode, that intro to Bullock is an incredible opening sequence where he's the marshal in Montana. And that sort of thing of like, because I remember the first time I was watching this, I was like, oh, okay, so he's going to face off against the lynch mob, and then he's going to put the horse thief on a horse and send him away and be like, no, you don't get to do, you don't get to lynch this guy or whatever. And it's like, no, he's not going to do necessarily the right thing. He's going to do the pragmatic thing, which is just to hang the dude himself, which is incredible.
Right. Yeah, I think this first scene is like, it's a masterclass in screenwriting for setting up your main character. Because just based on this scene, I think honestly, you know everything you need to know about Seth Bullock going through the next 36 episodes. That he is going to do what he feels is the right and best thing, even if it's difficult, no matter the situation. Like, he very easily could have been killed here. But for him, like, giving him up to this lynch mob is worse than death for him. He would rather take that risk and still do the right thing. And it's so good. And it's also really good interplay between him and John Hawkes playing Saul. I think you get their friendship. And Saul, in a lot of ways in this show, is a character you expect to be killed off, like in the first couple episodes. And I love that they kind of play with that. This show does that a lot. There's like probably 4 or 5 characters who you expect to die, who absolutely make it through the first 36 episodes. So you're like, you just never know what's going to happen. But their interplay really works because he goes along with it, but you can tell he's a lot more nervous about this situation than Seth is. He's like, okay, I got to go along with this because this is my friend and I got to stand by him, but I don't know if I would do this in this situation. And you kind of see that as they start their shop when they move to Deadwood, where he's willing to kind of play the game, and Seth is very upfront and like to the point of just outwardly threatening people who are, who have underhanded business dealings, which is maybe not the best way to get more business.
Yeah, no, I do love that where the guy's like, I found a prize in my piece of soap.
Right.
Like, of course, like, pedal that shit elsewhere.
Like, get the fuck out of here. Yeah, absolutely.
Right in his face. No, it's, like you say, I think there is that, that wonderful first sequence, because, 100% you are just like, okay, I have got the makings of this man top to bottom. Very easy for him to just turn the other cheek and just let them hang this dude. He's got no loyalty to him. It's like, no, the guy's got to be hanged, so I'll do it. And I'll make sure his last words get to whoever they get to, and then I'm getting the fuck out of here. But this is happening before I leave. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Very good. And then, I don't know. I hadn't watched this first episode for so long, and then just sitting down and watching it, and it was like putting on like a very familiar, very comfy blanket. I was like, oh,
yes.
The language is like, it's like caramel. It's just like, oh, this is lovely. I get like, I think what see, like you said, the last episode was The Wire, and then this one, like Deadwood. I don't think there is anything on TV that does as well as those two shows, to have like depth of language, no hand holding, and just like that sort of like repeatable dialogue that isn't like quotable, but it's like, oh, how good is this? It's like reading.
Like poetry. Once you hear it again, you're like, oh yeah, I remember this. This is so great.
Yeah, and just like, because again, I was trying to explain this show to my wife, and I'm like, yeah, I mean, every minute someone says fuck, everyone gets called a cocksucker. Like, but this is affectionate shit. This is just like punctuation. Right. It's not a show that's like.
Yep.
Like, the level of profanity in it it doesn't push you back. It sort of brings you in. It's like, yeah, just, we're just having, we've got this.
Get comfy. Yeah.
We've got this weird.
I'm glad you brought up the language, because I like did and like when I say research, I mean like going on Wikipedia or going on IMDb. It's not like a profound level of research, but there were definitely people who, when they first saw this episode, were taken aback by the language, because you just. Yeah. You don't, and outside of a Quentin Tarantino film, you don't hear the word fuck used that much. Yeah. Like, I think somebody wrote down there were 43 instances of the word fuck in the first hour of the show. Like, this is, it's, like you said, it's punctuation. Yeah. Fuck is a comma here. It's not even attacking. It's just like, that's the way we talk. And also, I found it interesting that, it feels so authentic, but it's really not. They talked to one of the guys who's one of the screenwriters, and they said, if we had to kind of make up our own language, our own cadence, because if it sounded like it did back in this time, everyone would sound like Yosemite Sam. Like, it would sound funny. It would sound ridiculous. So they had to kind of punch things up. And I think that's that's an interesting way to look at things, because if you look at like for instance, earlier this year, The Witch came out in cinemas, and people lost their minds about how authentic the language was and how great it was that they were recapturing that. And that was actually one of the things that pulled me out of the movie. One of the things that I didn't like was that it was so authentic that I had to work to understand it, whereas this feels authentic, but it takes no effort to understand what's going on. And I think it's a really difficult balance. Like, yeah, it's great if you can recreate things, but if you're trying to entertain people, then maybe tweak it a little bit, which I think they did a great job in Deadwood.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because it sounds, this is going to sound like an odd expression, but it sounds more difficult than it is. Like, because sometimes it feels weird in your ears, but at the same time, you know, it makes sense. It's actually quite funny. At the moment, I'm reading the book of Trainspotting, and that a lot of it is written in like Scottish.
That's a tough one.
Yeah. And I was just noticing last night, because I'm about like 200 pages into it, and I was just reading this thing, and it was just all in like dense Scotch dialect. But I wasn't stopping anymore. Like, I'd learnt it, so I was just sort of like,
right.
You know, I got to a point where like a slang word I hadn't seen before, my brain was just like instantly got the context clues and just solved it for me, and I was like, la, 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 la. Yep. And that's the thing with Deadwood, like the first couple of minutes,
right.
You are like, okay, so that's how, so it's quite long-winded, a lot of swearing, a lot of syllables sometimes. Okay, got it. You know, I'm in now.
Right. Yeah.
Like, the thing that made me, I don't know how this came to my head, but watching this, it makes me sort of disappointed that Game of Thrones isn't harder to watch, if that makes any sense. Like, I sort of had that with the last season. Like, I don't know if you watch Game of Thrones, but
I do. Yeah.
Yeah, like the last season, there was very much a sense of like the big ending was going to be this like explosion, but they couldn't trust you to not. They had to foreshadow it like every episode. Like,
yeah, they were really leading you to water there. Yeah, for sure.
But we'll work it out. We're obsessive TV watchers. We'll get it. Don't worry.
Right. Yeah. There's Reddit. There's Twitter. Yeah. Everybody knows. Calm down. Like, you know, I don't know if you watch. What's the other HBO show that just came out this year? Westworld. Yeah. I mean, and that was another show that I felt like was very good, but probably they could have cut the amount of episodes in half, because like by the time we got to these big reveals, we're like, yeah, we already knew that. Like, let's go. So it wasn't a big reveal, and I think like you bring up Game of Thrones, and that explosion sequence I think would be much more effective if you don't have so many clues and all of a sudden it explodes and you have to kind of pick up the pieces and figure out what's going on along with the characters, because the other characters don't know what's happening either. And I think that could be a joy of that, instead of like they went the route of like, let's build suspense instead of let's enjoy this.
Yeah, because that was the thing. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong. The execution of that was top notch.
Oh yeah.
But like, having that extra little bit of pudding on the top, just to be like, maybe they could have like mentioned it in the first episode of the season, and then obviously Reddit would have worked it out or whatever.
Right.
But if you'd managed to not see any fan theories and stuff, you would have just got to that and been like, oh shit, yeah, the wildfire, boom.
Yeah,
you know? And
exactly.
Like, oh, but by the time that episode started, I was like, okay, so because I was doing recaps for audiences everywhere, so I just put in my notes, wildfire explosion, you know, TBD. We'll get there at some point in this episode.
Right, exactly.
So I'll see where that goes, you know, and then this will happen, and this will, and it's probably why the show is so popular and why Deadwood only lasted 3 seasons.
Yeah, because they cater to the, you know, the unwashed masses, to the lowest common denominator. Like, they don't ask you to do any work. And I think it's one of those things that will make a show very popular in the short run. But it's, you know, I think you can err on that side. And then like 10 years from now, we're not talking about you at all. Where I think Deadwood, I think, is a show that the people who really like it are very passionate about it, and they will come back to it.
And interesting as well, like in the sense, I guess again to sort of talk about Game of Thrones, it is that sort of thing of, you don't need to be a fan of westerns.
Nope.
You know, it's not it's yes, it is about cowboys, but it's not. I mean, it's revisionist in the sense of like Unforgiven or something like that, where it's like, well, this leads me into a perfect thing. Obviously, I sent you the poster this week for Calamity James starring Doris Day.
Yes.
Which was, I remember as a musical I watched yonks ago when I was a little kid, and I thought it was great. And then when Calamity Jane comes into the show, I do feel as though that is like David Milch just saying like, just in case you've not got what we're going for,
fuck you.
Here's Calamity Jane.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And actually, I find the two female characters who show up in this first episode to be really, really interesting as the show goes on. Like you have Alma Garrett, and you have Calamity Jane. On the one hand, you have Alma, who seems soft and seems like she doesn't fit in this world, and then you have the tough, hard drinking, shooting Calamity Jane. But then this whole, throughout the first season, this baby comes into the picture, and those roles completely swap. But somehow it still works. Those characters are so well written that you get a picture of them in the first episode, and by like maybe 5-6 episodes in, that picture completely changes, and that is such a cool piece of writing and piece of character work.
That strength of like how well they will change characters over the course of the show in just like tiny increments, or with like inciting incidents, and like there's not a sense of, but the changes are not huge. They're not ridiculous. It's not a point where a character just wakes up one day and you're like, oh, you've completely 180'd. It's like, no, everything leans on everything else, and everything else makes sense. Yep. Like, to talk about Swearingen, by the time you get to the last episode and he's sort of more of an ally towards Bullock, it's a shaky alliance based on the introduction of an X Factor, which is George Hurst.
Right.
So okay, this makes sense. It's not like they've warmed to each other over the course of like living near each other. It's a friendship of I can't think of a necessity.
Well, it's like
just to survive.
Yeah, like of convenience. Like we need each other. It's more of a business partnership than it is a friendship. And it was really interesting to watch just the first and last episode for your podcast. I think it's such a great experiment because you could really see, and honestly, like in terms of television shows, this show didn't last that long. 3 seasons is nothing, Like I would bet the average of great shows is probably about 5 seasons. Like that's usually what you need to tell your whole story. But so much happens in the 36 episodes that watching the first and the last, you're like, I have to like rack my brain like, oh, how is this working? Who is this character? And how did they get here? And I was also noticing as I was watching these episodes, like, it was so crazy to watch this years later because there's so many actors who I've now seen in other things, or they're quote unquote that guys, or you're like, oh, I've seen that guy in 1,000 different things. I mean, you've got Jeffrey Jones, you've got Timothy Olmanson, who like now I guess has gotten a little bit big in TV world, like doing shows like Psych and Gallivant, like, which are very different characters from the character he's playing here. You have Brad Dourif, John Hawkes, Jim Beaver, who went on to be in Supernatural a bunch. Like these people who have just like stayed in this TV realm, but when I watched this originally, had no clue who these people were. So it's so, and even like in later seasons, you see, I'm trying to remember Brian Cox shows up like as a recurring character, and you're like, how did this come together? How did this happen? It just goes to show, I think, when you create great work and you manage to get on a big time channel like HBO, good talent is going to flock. And I think they did a great job casting this show because they don't have any superstars. And I think if you have superstar actors in any of these roles, the show kind of falls apart because you can't have a quote unquote main character. Like you said, every character in every moment leans on the previous moment. So if you have someone where you're like, oh, that's fill in the blank, then you lose that moment, that momentum. And I think they did a great job of that.
That's very good. Like no one sort of like pulls focus. It's all just like very, very strong character actors. And and like you say, it's that interesting thing now. This is definitely one of those shows where when you're watching another show and there'll be like a guest star, you're like, oh shit, that's so and so from Deadwood. Like
exactly.
I think I did read a thing, and it's like, I'm pretty sure there was something ridiculous, like 20 actors from this show were on Sons of Anarchy at some point.
Right.
And like 25 of them were on Justified. And, it is that sort of thing of like, this has become a bit of a stable for character actors who just appear on all different things. Like, I'm sure that someone's plotted them out on some sort of chart somewhere on the internet of where everyone fits in and all that. And and it's very much a sense of like, oh yeah, that guy. And Brian Cox, I love Brian Cox.
In everything.
He's just amazing. Like He's one of those actors who, like, you could start listing the roles he's done, and then you just go on forever and ever and ever. And
Yeah,
he's good in this.
absolutely.
He's good in that. He's the best thing in this. He's the best thing in that.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. He always stands out in that good way, not as if like, oh, I can't get into the show, but he's always going to put in a great performance. And this performance, him like playing an actor, is a very different performance for him. So I really enjoyed that. And we kind of talked about like no one stands out in that way, and I think you can even transfer that not just to the actors but to the characters. Like the fact that really the only character that everyone's like, oh, I know who that is Wild Bill Hickok. Right? So he's a character in a lot of ways you assume like, oh, he's going to be around. That's Wild Bill. But really the first, quarter of the first season is the story of his death. And it's about what's going to happen to him. So he, like, as he enters the town, he's like a celebrity. And I love that within a couple episodes, he's dealt with and completely dispatched from the storyline. Like I think his real goal here in the show is to show that no one is safe and to bring Bullock into this place where he's the sheriff. Like that is the goal, and that really starts off the first season and sets us running. I think the first truly great episode of the show is the episode where Wild Bill dies, and it's phenomenal. And it's something now you see in TV shows all the time, where someone's going to die, and we spend half the episode from the point of view of the person who's going to kill him, who's a completely minor character. And it's almost like a bottle episode, and it's not connected to anything else, but will be later. And I just think it's expertly done.
Yeah, it's fantastic because it is, like you say, it sort of situates you because you kind of say, okay, well, I know who Calamity Jane is, I know who Wild Bill is, cool.
Right.
And then obviously that's just whipped away from you because you're like, well, that's not the Calamity Jane that I remember.
Exactly.
And then 2 minutes later, Wild Bill's dead. And it's interesting as well, of those three characters, Calamity Jane, Wild Bill, and Charlie Utter sort of becomes the major character.
Yep.
He's the one you don't know anything about, and he's the one who, by the end of the... He featured quite prominently in the final episode, and he has some fucking fantastic lines of dialogue. Like, in the final episode, he has a line of dialogue which I was sort of like... Before I'd even watched the episodes, when I was planning this recording, he had a line of dialogue, and I was like, I've got to track that down, because I think it's perfect. And it turns out it was actually in the last episode, and it's where he says to the guy... have I written something? Oh yeah, he's like, you better make sure he gets home safe, or you'll be eating your spuds running until I hunt you the fuck down.
That's a great line. Yes.
It's so evocative of because instantly that concept of you better be eating your spuds running. I just have this image in my head of that guy just huddled over a campfire, just shoveling potatoes into his mouth, looking over his shoulder, waiting for Charlie to appear. And that's one sentence.
Yeah.
And it's just...
It gives you such an image. It tells you so much about what's going on. The other thing I love about this show is it would be granted, when you talk about issues of gender, you're not going to have a show that, people who are really into social justice are going to really tie themselves to, because they're not going to treat women the greatest. But there are some really strong female characters in this show that really surprised me, and ones that have really interesting arcs. Like Calamity Jane's arc in this show is phenomenal. Like when she first shows up, it's hard because you kind of despise her. She's kind of awful, but you kind of enjoy her being kind of the toughest person in the room, even in a room full of guys. Like you like that, but you also like how much she changes. And we already talked about Alma Garrett, who's another great character. There are some really strong, provocative, interesting female characters in this show, and it's actually something that kept me away from watching it for a while. It was I don't know if I'm ready for a show set in the Old West that's set primarily at a whorehouse. That might be a little much for me, but I feel like those characters are not given short shrift. Yes, there is a fair amount of nudity, a fair amount of disposable female characters, but there's also some really interesting female characters that make it through the run of the show.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, a note that like you were saying before about watching just the first and the last, one thing that that came to me was both episodes are sort of about Swearingen covering up Trixie's mess.
Yep.
The first episode, obviously, she shot that dude in the head, and he has to deal with that. And then the last episode, she shot Hurst, and he's got to kill the other poor girl because there's that great Swearingen line where he explains why. I think he's talking to the head in the box, and he does sort of say to the head, I can't kill Trixie. When I was sick and she sat with me and all that, and it's that's a bit of weird humanity from Swearingen in the sense of he owes Trixie something, so he'd rather just kill the poor innocent girl than kill Trixie. And that is sort of, in terms of, in Swearengen's world, is that morality? Is that what he considers fairness, I guess?
Yeah, I think yeah, it's really interesting on a couple levels. One, what you brought up, that he's willing to kill someone who's totally innocent because he has a connection to Trixie, and two, that he thinks it's important to kill her in the right way so she doesn't suffer. And that's what you're getting as far as morality with Swearingen. You're getting the, like, yes, I'm going to do this terrible thing, but I'm going to do it in the most efficient and painless way possible, because yes, I have to do this, but there's no reason for me to be vicious and vindictive about it.
Well, there's also the thing as well, which again is sort of, I guess, fairness or whatever in Swearingen's world. When he's on the sort of, they're inside, he's on the balcony, and Jen comes out with the John or whoever. Mm-hmm. And Swearingen actually sort of, like, his sort of, like, bit of mercy is to try and persuade the guy to go back to bed with her again, so that she just has a little bit more time before he kills her. Mm-hmm. But you're like, yeah, but surely let her do something she wants to do rather than fucking this random dude.
Yep.
And because the dude won't pay, well, that's it. You're shit out of luck, Jan. Your throat's about to get... You know, and it's like... And it almost feels like that to Swearingen is kindness.
Yep.
But it's so skew-whiff. It's such a... it's so, like, morally all over the shop. You're like... She clearly has a bit of a thing with Johnny, so let Johnny have a day with her. It's like,
right. Nope.
This random dude's there. No, he's not going to pay. Get fucked. Come to my office.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because when it all boils down, Al Swearingen, before anything else, is a businessman. Like, he's going to make the right decision for him and for his house, no matter who it hurts. Like, even if he feels like, yeah, I probably shouldn't do this, like, on a... Because I think it's interesting. I don't think he's unaware of morality. I think he's aware that what he's doing is bad, quote unquote. But in this world with no laws and no police, you kind of get to run things the way you want to. And, you know, he doesn't want anyone coming in. Like, I think the idea of Bill Hickok coming into town is not a good thing for him, even though it's drumming up business because more people are out trying to catch a glimpse of him. He knows that, like, this will inspire people towards law and order.
I mean, and that's very much the sense of, like, his loyalties are to, I guess as the show goes along, his loyalties are to the jam, to his own business, to his own wealth. And then gradually sort of, it's the entire camp, but only in terms of how that benefits him. So if the camp falls or the camp gets taken over by Hearst, that's going to reverberate back and fuck his original thing, the business. Mm-hmm. And yeah, like you say, and the things he will do to protect that, and the alliances he will make, and the people whose throats he'll slit, and so forth. Yep. And that sort of is morality, or that is... Yeah, it's there. I also found he's aware.
I also found it interesting that in the first episode, I think there's some line in there about him saying, like, I should have learned to use a gun. So it's interesting that we have this character in an Old West shoot 'em up type show that will never use a firearm, that will only use his fists or only use a knife. And he's one of your main characters. And I found that, like, a really interesting thing to point out, that you kind of, like, now it made me want to watch the rest of the series again to see if he ever picked up a gun, because it's been so long. But I just thought, like, wow, what an interesting line to have for one of your main characters in a Western.
Yeah, very much. I mean, I think that it's funny you said that line stuck out to me as well, because it's... Yeah, it makes sense, obviously, for the character, but it's just, like, it's an interesting thing because you've got, like, okay, well, this makes him a massive aberration in this world because he didn't use a gun, but it's also a very Swearingen sort of thing that he would only know how to use a knife. Like, he would only know how to do, like, close quarters, look them in the eye, plunge a knife into them, like, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Which weirdly gives you some more respect for him, that he's not going to take anybody out from a distance, and he is eventually going to get his hands dirty, which is why I think that end of season 1 brawl with Seth Bullock is so affecting, because usually he has other people do this work for him. And in a weird way, because he's so funny and so enjoyable, we're like, even though he does terrible things, there's a part of us like, Swearingen's fine. Don't worry about him. But then that fight happens, and it completely changes your outlook on who these people are for the other 24 episodes coming up.
Yeah, very much so. Like, I think, I mean, obviously, as an English viewer, we all had the thing of like Deadwood. Ian McShane was famous in England for a show called Lovejoy, which was about a detective who specialized in buying antiques, and it was like old person Sunday night TV.
Yeah, it was on A&E here. I remember watching it like with my dad when I was a kid, who loved that show. So this is a shock to the system.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know how, because I looked at IMDb, and it's not like he did Lovejoy and then he gradually worked his way up to this. It's sort of like Lovejoy, a bunch of crap, a guest spot on West Wing, and then Deadwood. So I mean, I don't know if he's just got an exceptionally good agent, or I was actually reading a little snippet today. And basically, they just said, like, at his audition, he came in, and David Milch has a quote where he says, he came in and he just took the room by the scruff of the neck, shook us around, and then we had it.
Yep.
And obviously, Ian McShane has then carved out a career from this. Like, I mean, if I see Ian McShane's name on credits, like Brian Cox, you've got my interest. Like,
absolutely. Same.
John Wick. You know, as soon as I saw he was in John Wick, I was like, ooh.
Right.
I've heard good things, but I know this is going to be great now.
I just love his personality, too. Like, he was in an episode of Game of Thrones, and I guess accidentally gave away a spoiler-ish thing, and people came after him, and his response was like, get over yourself. It's tits and dragons. Calm down. And I was like, that is phenomenal. Like, how do you not love this guy? Like, and like you said, it's very rare you see him in a project that is bad. Like, and some of it's because he's so good. But like you said, look at the TV roles he's chosen. Like, they've all been high-quality stuff.
I mean, when they said they were making a TV show of American Gods is probably in my top 3 favorite books.
It's a great book.
And I was like, come on, I just need everything to fall into place. And then they cast a few people. I was like, okay, this looks cool. There's some interesting shit going on here. And then they were like, oh, Ian McShane's going to be Mr. Wednesday. Like, shut up.
Right.
Just take
in.
Done.
Yeah.
The rest of the cast could be anyone, but you've got me, because that is just bone dry, perfect casting. Like, perfect. So that's it. And it's, so when this show first started, it was all over the talk shows in England, because Ian McShane would go on the talk show and they'd be like, so you're more known for this, and they'd show a clip of Lovejoy, and he'd kind of look at the camera and be all like a cheeky chappy. He's like, but now you're doing this. And then it would cut to him, like, you know, doing something fucked up on Deadwood. And I think whether or not the like David Milch and his crew knew that sort of baggage that he was bringing, and how that would affect sort of a certain degree of the audience watches this and instantly swearing, and you're like, that's Lovejoy. Oh, and it knocks you back a little bit.
Yeah, that first episode really heals you of anything like that. Like, just, this is not Lovejoy.
Yeah, once you're through that, you're fine. I mean, because that first episode, they do so much good work with him. Like, I think having that thing of Ellsworth saying to him, you know, your limey accent, and then Tim Driscoll's like has a bit of a dig at him for being English and stuff like that. So you've got Ian McShane doing a perfectly good American accent, but if it slips, they've covered themselves. Yep. Like, I think you do find there's so many English actors doing American accents on TV, and a lot of the time it's fine on a base level, but if they get upset or they get angry, the accent slips.
It comes out. Like, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, like, surprised that the lead guy in like Walking Dead, I've only watched a couple episodes of that, be like, yeah, if you're just having a conversation, you're sort of Kentucky, Alabama, whatever the fuck the accent is, works. But if you have to emote in any way, you're like Kentucky via London, you know. So but I think it's a little thing,
Yeah, but I think Ian McShane's, like, talking about his accent here, I think it's actually phenomenal. Like, I think sometimes when actors put on an accent, there's a lack of richness to their voice and to their cadence, where it doesn't feel natural. It feels like this is a good accent, but it's very flat. You know, every syllable is hit just the right way, and it's almost too perfect. Whereas as Al Swearengen's character, like, this feels real. This doesn't feel like something that's put on until you hear Ian McShane in interviews, and then you're like, oh my God, where did that come from? Like, I had no idea that was put on at all. So it's really impressive vocal work.
Yeah, and it's fantastic. And I think I don't even know if I made a note of this. I was just thinking it's it. So when he does the thing with Tim Driscoll, and Driscoll's like, so we got him up to 20,000, and 30% of that is $6,000. And by the time that interaction has ended, and Swearingen has had maybe 2 lines of dialogue, Tim Driscoll walks away with $20 and a free prostitute.
Yep.
So he starts at 6,000, obviously a fortune in that time period, and then walks away with like a bit of his gambling debt paid off, $20 in cash, and as he puts it, a quote piece of pussy, end quote.
And there's so much put across from Ian McShane's stares. And that's, he doesn't have to say anything. He just has to look at him for Driscoll to know, like, oh, this isn't going to work either. And you can see Driscoll get more and more upset throughout this because he knows he's getting screwed, but there's absolutely nothing he can do against Swearingen in this situation.
Yeah, like you say, that whole thing where he just starts off and he's all very blarney, very Irish, and then it's just, by the end, he's just like, oh, give us fucking $20. Fuck.
Like, I'll take anything at this point. Just get me out of this room alive.
Yeah, that's it. Like, I'll just take it. Let's go. And then obviously it's just like, as soon as he's gone, it's just, don't forget to kill Tim. That's it. Just like, give me $20.
Exactly.
Let him have his night, and then just kill him. No, that is a fantastic character as well. Dan Doherty, like, is it W. Earl Brown?
Yeah, W. Earl Brown. Yep.
Who I think he wrote a couple of episodes. He may have directed one or two. He does on AV Club. They do on AVClub.com. They do random roles. Mm-hmm. So an actor will come in and they just talk about a bunch of roles they've done. And his one, well, it's actually fascinating. If you look up anyone who's been in Deadwood and read their random roles, John Hawkes is really good as well. The section on Deadwood is always fascinating. And like Dan Doherty's one, he talks about how I think he went out drinking, or he went out for a meal with David Milch and another guy who I can't remember, who was in The Wire, both reformed heroin addicts. And he said, and he just sat and was listening to them, and I think like they just talked about their music careers, their writing careers, told heroin stories and all that. And like, oh my god, that's just, for some reason, that just sounds amazing. Just like these very smart guys who have like gone through all that shit, and then they're just kind of like having lunch with this dude and talking about
right.
it. And he also talks about, there's I don't know which series this is in, where Dan has a street fight with a guy, and again it's another very brutal fight, and I think he punches the guy's eye out.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
And that was the thing. David Milch went up to hit the two actors and said, right, take this away with you, choreograph it, give me something and come back. And they went and worked it out. And I think what it was, they were telling stories about fights they'd seen and stuff like that. And one of them mentioned punching an eye out. And they're cool, let's do that. And then they do the fight. And it's fascinating. And John Hawkes is amazing. Like, he tells this weird story that, like, working with David Milch, where he would, like, so John Hawkes, like, Sol Star would do, like, a line. And then he said, like, David Milch would come up to you and tell you a story about a casino robbery. And then he'd walk away. And then you'd do the line again. And somehow that little story influenced and changed your line. He said he'd quote Hamlet at you or something, just like, say all this mad shit, and somehow that worked and made the lines better. And like, this sounds incredible.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is one of those shows that it's interesting you mentioned that, because it's so, everything depends on everything else, but so much of this feels like they all also kind of made it on the fly too. Like they had it feels like they had these big moments that were all kind of planned out from the beginning, but all the kind of in between, you could do some different things there and use your actors in ways that maybe you wouldn't in another show.
Yeah. And I mean, it's an incredible thing of like how funny this incredibly violent show was.
Yes.
I mean, it's again, it's actually quite interesting, the comparison again to The Wire. Like, The Wire was an not underrated, because we're not using that word anymore. It was a very, very funny show for something that was very, very dark.
Right.
And the same with this. Like, there are some characters in Deadwood who are just comedy. Like, E.B. Farnham was just an annoying rat of a character, but very, very funny.
He's another character I did not expect to make it through season 3. He just seems like the character that midway through season 1 would be killed off in one way or another.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. You sort of you think, okay, well, we're going to lose Farnham. You're probably going to lose Star. You're probably going to lose Trixie.
Yep.
I always sort of had it in my head they were gonna kill off Dan. So that would make Swearingen weak because he wouldn't have Dan there.
Right.
Well, no, some people just get through.
Yeah.
I mean,
especially for a show that's this violent too. Like, you expect people to die.
Yeah, that's it. And then so it was an incredible thing because to use, I guess, the Game of Thrones comparison, Game of Thrones has gotten to the point now where they kill off so many characters and so many main characters.
Who cares?
It's become like the language of the show.
Yep.
But where Deadwood, one of the deaths that really sort of it just came out of nowhere, is when they kill Ellsworth. Because you're like, no,
Yeah.
Ellsworth's wonderful. He's this amazing character, but he's just and he's such a tossed off casualty as well, because he's just like Hearst just has him killed for the sake of it,
to prove a point.
Wow.
Yeah,
to prove a point.
Yep.
Yeah, and then another character who survives, who probably you think is going to get killed, Hearst.
Yeah.
To talk about a bit, like, I think we haven't done the usual structure for this podcast. We've come all over the place, which has been great. But for this final episode, like, the character of Hearst is so infuriating. You just even though I knew how I'd seen this before, and I knew he just sort of rides off, smirking prick that he is.
Right.
I was still sort of like, maybe like after the credits, there's a scene where someone shoots him,
right?
Or like he wakes up and Swearingen's just over him with a knife. Like, no, it's just this guy. And he annoyed me so much that when I finished watching the episode, I then looked up George Hearst, the real George Hearst, to find out how he died. And he died of old age, a 70-year-old man. Like,
oh no!
I was like, I wanted to be like trampled by a horse or something. Like,
right,
just,
something painful.
Guy.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was the difficult part about doing this podcast, is watching that last episode, because when I first watched the show, I did not know any of the background about how this show ended. Which is kind of fraught with some controversy. Like, I guess, HBO didn't want to do a full season, and Milch wasn't ready to end the show in like 5 or 6 hours. Then he agreed to do like a set of like a mini series, and that had gotten agreement, and then that fell off the table. And they keep asking people, is it going to happen? Is it going to happen? Like, Ian McShane gets asked this at every interview, and he always says, Deadwood is dead. Like, let it go. But if you look on Wikipedia, apparently Milch is trying to write a screenplay for a movie version of Deadwood, which would be great to kind of wrap everything up, because you are left with this hole as this episode ends, that like, wait, we're stopping now. It's not like a lot of the shows that you've covered on your podcast, where it has a definitive end, and like, here's our series finale episode, and we're gonna wrap it all up. Like, whatever you think about shows like Lost, that show ended, and they had a structure of how they wanted to end it, and they did it. Whereas this just ended against its will, and it just kind of, so it's at this really weird stopping point. I think the last episode is excellent, but it definitely does leave you feeling like, but where's the rest? Like, I want to finish this story. What happens to Bullock? What happens to Saul? What happens to all these characters? Like, I'm interested in where this is going, and we might not ever get that closure, which really sucks.
Yeah, I mean, I think on this podcast, like, even shows that have been like cancelled before their time, in a lot of cases, their last episode still forms a pretty good finale. Like, the last episode of Twin Peaks is still pretty good.
Right.
Firefly got a movie. Probably Hannibal is probably the closest, but the difference, I would say, between like Hannibal and this, like, when we talked, me and Keith Gow, when we talked about
Hannibal, wait, no spoilers though. I'm actually in the middle of watching season 3 of Hannibal right now for the first time. But I've heard that the finale is amazing. So
it is. And we spend a lot of time speculating on what could have happened next.
Right.
Whereas I feel like with Deadwood, we know what's going to happen next.
Right.
Hearst is going to come back to town, and it's going to be war.
Yep.
And that's what I want. You want that thing of like, you've had these disparate characters all forced into this one place, and then you've ignited this sort of rebellion or this alliance with them by introducing Hearst, an unrepentant shit of a character who has somehow made these like all these elements be like, well, he is a danger to our way of life. We need to stop him. And then you get up to the dominoes are all in place, but you never get to push the dominoes down.
Yep.
There's just dominoes everywhere. You're like, no, this doesn't work. And then
I totally agree. Especially because some of the greatest moments of this show are when things finally boil over. Like, we talked a lot about that fight between Swearingen and Bullock, and that's when, all this buildup of 12 hours of television has finally reached its boiling point, and they unleash. And I feel like this last episode was reaching the boiling point, and you're just waiting for everyone to unleash, and we don't get it. And that's really upsetting from it, especially because, like, I think if I had known that it ended before its time, I would have been like, okay, I'm ready for this to end weirdly. But I had no idea. And then the last episode ends, and you're just like, that's it? That's where we're stopped. Oh, come on, guys. Go with the rest.
There's no. It's not even like a cliffhanger. It's like it's just it feels as though it's a great. I mean, if the show had 2 more seasons, it'd be a cracking like season finale. You'd be like, oh god, that is juicy. I can't wait for this to come back.
It's like it ends 10 feet before the cliff. Like, we're not quite at that cliffhanger yet, because we're just gonna like, okay, we've set all the pieces in motion, and next season it's on. And we never get to next season, unfortunately. So hopefully this movie thing ends up happening. Like, I don't know how well it'll do because it's been so long since the show has been on, but I would be there opening day for sure.
Oh sure. Well, I mean, it is that thing. Like, I've just been writing a thing about the new Train Spotting, and there is that thing that we have in this day and age where I think when I sort of started watching movies and I started watching TV, it was very much a sense of like, if something was over, it was over. You know, like if a show got cancelled, like when Twin Peaks got cancelled, people were like, well, that's the last we'll ever see of Twin Peaks.
Right.
And it's like, no, in 3 months or 4 months, there's going to be there's going to be 18 more hours of this.
Yep.
Like nothing dies anymore.
Right.
Like I feel like if Deadwood had been a show that had been on last year, and well, even now there's still talk of how we can bring Hannibal back, how Hannibal can continue.
I keep hearing rumors of them doing a Silence of the Lambs season. So I think that's like the good and the bad thing about the like supposed golden era of television we're in right now is that on one hand, like sometimes I think we're bringing things back that have no right to come back, like say Fuller House. You know, like come on, this is pure nostalgia, just like, oh, I remember that when I was a kid, so I'll like it now, you know, whatever. Yeah. But the flip side of that, the good side of that is maybe some really great shows get a revival, you know, like a Deadwood, like a Twin Peaks, you know, these shows, and maybe like a Hannibal in a couple years, you know, that now after its death seems, it's like when a famous artist dies and the price goes up. As soon as Hannibal was on the chopping block, all of a sudden, I kept hearing people say it's the greatest show on television. How could you do this? But I didn't hear word one about it during season 1. You know, so it's that idea that like, okay, now we can bring some good things back. So hopefully, fingers crossed.
Yeah, I mean that's it. I mean it's very much a sort of thing of. I was walking through the city yesterday, and I looked up, and there was a huge billboard for the Power Rangers movie, and I was like, who's the audience for that? And then when I looked on Twitter, I was like, oh, the audience seems to be... I'm 32 years old, and there were contemporaries of me, of my age, my peers, if you will, who were like, oh my god, Power Rangers movie, this is going to be amazing. Like, no,
you should stop speaking to them. You should just stop talking to them. Like, honestly, if you are 30 and older right now and super excited about that movie, I have questions for you. Because I actually, like, I was a little bit too old to ever be into it, so I'm like, okay, that's not my thing. I tried watching a couple old episodes, and I was like, I can't, this is too much for me, I can't do this. But it's not for me, right? So I miss that, so that's fine. So if you're younger and that like really ties into your childhood and you're like, I can't wait, I totally get that. But like, even if you like that show, like, you know, it's not quality, you know, like it's trashy and it's supposed to be, and now they're making it into this big budget special effects bonanza. And I just saw the trailer for that at a movie yesterday when I went and saw Logan, and I was like, what is this nonsense? Like, like, can you have less than zero interest in something? Can you have negative interest? Because I watched that and I was like, nope, just tuning out now.
Yeah, no, that's it. It's weird, and I think like tying it back to Deadwood, like it is that thing of Fuller House, and well, in order to write this Trainspotting thing, I was like, okay, let's see what they're bringing back, and I found this like slideshow, and it was like shows that are being revived or being rebooted. And I was flicking through it, and it took about 40 minutes to go through them all. It was like,
there's a lot.
MacGyver, Lethal Weapon. Like, fucking hell.
Ugh.
Yeah, no, it's
even
wild.
the Exorcist television show, for God's sakes, like everything is coming back. Like, just stop.
Everything gets another go around. So that does sort of make me think that, you know, I mean, Deadwood as well. I guess no one from the cast has really sort of broken out massive, you know.
Right.
Obviously, everyone knows who Timothy Olyphant and everyone knows who Ian McShane is, but it's not like you know, Timothy Olyphant has won an Oscar or something like that and like grown in huge
Yeah,
proportions.
it's not as if they're big budget draws. It's not like they're in, $500 million movies. Like it's, they're keep doing their character actor thing, even if they're. I find Timothy Olyphant and Ian McShane's character, their career is very interesting because even when they are main characters, they're still doing the character actor thing. They're not out there in front of this tentpole blockbuster. They're doing really interesting work. So I think they could slide back into Deadwood really easily.
Yeah, I mean, that was the thing we were talking about with Hannibal. It's like the Hugh Dancy, whatever, like the guy who plays Will Graham, is still just doing like TV work and stuff like that. Obviously, Mads has gone stellar. He is like Star Wars, Marvel. He's a draw. So that would obviously be a hard thing, like getting the band back together for that one.
Right.
But I just like you say, Deadwood is one of those ones where I just need a 15-minute YouTube short in which Al Swearingen stabs George Hurst.
Sold. I would pay money to watch that.
Yeah. I think before Logan they had that little short of Deadpool.
Right.
Keep people's interest up. Cool. Just find me a movie that comes out. Don't care. And just have it just start, and it's just like, oh, welcome to Deadwood. Stab.
Right. Done. So happy. Agreed.
Done. Yeah. Well, we're going to have to wrap this up soon, but any final thought? Oh, sorry, I just have one line of dialogue which I thought was amazing, and it's the whole thing in the final episode with Johnny and Swearingen, where Johnny's going to kill Jen, and that's a whole ridiculous comedy thing of him going to do it, then he's not going to do it, and he's talking about the wall full of ants and all that.
Right.
When, like, Johnny's saying to Swearingen, he's like, oh, just give me the fucking knife. And he takes, like, a shot of whiskey, and he's just like, as he's walking out, he just turns around and goes, fucking Trixie. And Swearingen's like, you don't have to tell me. It's just like, oh my god, that is just genius. And I do love that mirror of the first and the last episode of, like, Trixie just fucking up their shit, and them having to, like...
Right. I also love that Trixie line because it spits in the face of bad screenwriting, right? The idea that like you have to tell the audience why you're upset and tell them what's going on in case they missed the last 35 hours of the show. Like I love that Swearingen goes, you don't have to tell me. Like I know what's going on, you idiot. And I love Swearingen because he's always like, especially the people he works with, most of them, except for Dan, he's like 10 steps ahead of them at all times. Like he is the one who always knows what's going on. Even if as an audience, we're not sure, we can bank on the fact that he is sure. So I love that line occurs between these characters who could not be more disparate in intelligence level and knowing what's going on.
Yeah, no, and it's just genius and just like a nice bit of comedy before violence.
Yep.
A comedy about violence, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
Just great, and just such a just great. I'm just sort of having a look to see on my notes if there's anything that I have missed out. No, I mean, I think my sort of final thoughts are, this is definitely one of those shows that it's interesting really that this show has become one of those ones that when people are tallying up like the best ever, this show sort of it's either in people's top 3 or it doesn't seem to get mentioned. Like I feel as though it's one of those shows that it never blew up as big as say like Breaking Bad.
Right.
And it didn't sort of have that word.
Yeah, I mean I think it was like too early for that. I think Breaking Bad owes a lot to shows like Deadwood. Like I don't think that's a show that makes it without a show like Deadwood kind of priming the audience for things like this.
Yeah, I mean I'm probably giving too much credit to Ian McShane and all that, but like I think it is interesting that you've got that thing of Ian McShane having the established character of like Lovejoy, and then him playing this complete opposite, and then with Bryan Cranston you've got his established character of Malcolm in the Middle, and then he switched that completely around for Walter White. And also as well, like I say, the similarity of having, I guess the difference between like say Walter White and Swearingen is like Swearingen doesn't start good and become bad.
Right.
Walter White starts at nothing and then becomes this kingpin or whatever. But also you do have that thing of like at a certain point you can't be a mustache twirling villain all the time.
Right.
But you can't mellow the characters out, but you can bring in worse people. And those worse people will make your bad guy into more of a hero, which I think Breaking Bad did very well. And, well, it's actually interesting. I think they tried to do this on House of Cards in the second season. Like they brought in like a villainous businessman, and he was played by the guy who plays George Hurst.
Yep.
Yeah.
I remember seeing that and thinking like, oh, so we're gonna bring this guy in always to be the bad guy, like just the worst. I mean, I think for me, Deadwood is, I won't say underrated, as we've talked about, but I think it's underappreciated. I think it's a show that a lot of people missed when it was airing, me included. So what I would say is give this show a shot. Give the first 4 episodes a shot. Like, if it doesn't grip you by the time that Wild Bill dies, the show isn't for you, because that is where everything kind of comes together. I mean, that would be a really interesting mini series, like those first 4 episodes.
Yeah.
So if you're not grasped by the time Bill Hickok dies, then you're not going to enjoy the show. But I would say give it those first 4 episodes, and I think most people would be really into it. It's smartly written. It's impeccably well acted. There's not really a weak link in this show. Like, I think everyone is borderline perfect in these roles, and you just don't see that many super high quality shows like this. I think this is on another level than the 99% of television shows out there. Like, it is definitely one of the best. Like, I don't think I've ever put together a top 10 list of my favorite TV shows, but this would, I think almost definitely be in my top 5. I think it can leave a bad taste in your mouth because of the way it ends, but I think the process of it is so worth it.
Yeah, I think you do have to look at it like, okay, the ending is very frustrating, but the show never wanes in quality. I guess that's the thing.
Yeah.
If you sit down and you say, right, I'm going to watch 36 episodes of this, you're going to have 36 entertaining hours. It's not going to be like, oh yeah, you're going to have 20 good ones and 16 that are a little bit shaky. It's like, no,
they're
like
all very good to great.
Book. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, exactly.
Every chapter is quality, and like you say, even the characters who are annoying, like Calamity James, like Farnham,
right?
They are well written annoying.
Right, they're annoying in quality ways. It's not just, oh, I don't like the performance. It's like, that's who that character is. They're supposed to get on your nerves.
Yeah, and about like the first episode, like Jack McCall, the card player.
Yep.
When he's sort of like, oh, you called my bluff. Oh wait, I found this secret 8. You're like, dude, just chill the fuck out.
Right.
But that is my character. He has to annoy people in order for Hickok to sort of humiliate him, and so on and so on.
Yep.
Which is absolutely genius, and they say it's on Amazon Prime.
Yep.
In Australia, there's a streaming service over here called Stan. It's on that, so
it's free.
Stan,
go get it.
Yeah. Stan does a 30-day free trial. If you can't watch it all in 30 days, you can watch it all in 30 days. Don't even worry.
Yes, definitely.
And it's an odd, like you say, it's a very odd show. I think we talked about this right at the start of the podcast. It's a show that you feel like, oh, I shouldn't be able to binge this for its content, for its violence, for its denseness. But to be honest, like watching this first episode, at the end when it said, "Do you want to watch the next episode?"
I wanted to. I was like, no, just first and last, Dave. Focus.
yeah. I've got rules.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, it's like, okay, cool. But then I think as well, as a first to last show, like watching that last episode, it's not like a spoiler or anything for the rest of the episodes, but there was that sense of like, you could see character movement from first to last, like characters had moved places. And
all of them. I don't think there's a single character that hasn't grown or changed from the first to the last episode.
Yeah, no one's in static. Everyone's like over the course of 36 hours,
which considering you've got like 30 main characters, that's really impressive.
Yeah, that's it. Like by the time, because at the end you do see a few people are wearing like silver badges. Like, okay, so you got some law enforcement and like Sol and Trixie, and where Swearingen is and where Dan is, and there's some new characters, and obviously you've got Brian Cox just being pure like Shakespearean actor.
So good.
Cool. Okay, well, Dave, where can people find you on the internet?
Yeah, so I have a podcast, as you mentioned, called Pop Culture Case Study, where we take a look at movies and psychology. So, for instance, because Logan was coming out this week, we took a movie that highly influenced James Mangold in that movie and looked at Shane. When you watch Logan, you'll see just how much he was influenced by Shane. It plays a prominent part, so that was pretty exciting for me personally. So we took a look at Shane and the importance of community. So every week we do an old movie and a new movie. We tie them together, so you get 2 episodes a week. Again, it's called Pop Culture Case Study. You can find it on wherever you get your podcasts from, or you can contact me on Twitter at PC Case Study.
Well, I think an episode I listened to your podcast recently was Speed and Entitlement. And I sort of like, I was like, okay, this will be interesting. And then Dave Shreve is obviously editor of Audience Everywhere.
That hack. So, yeah, Jesus.
That hack. Overrated.
A great guest, I will say, a fantastic guest.
Oh yeah, no, super whip smart guy. And it was interesting, like, I would never have at any point thought to myself, Speed deserved a psychological breakdown.
Right.
And then after like listening to the podcast, I was listening to it on the tram, and I was just sort of sat there staring out the window, and I was just like, what the fuck is this? This is so good. Like, I feel like I need to go home and like watch Speed, but watch Speed and like with an analytical eye. Like, no, right. It's a film about a fast bus. But no, just genius. Like both you and like your whole thing is like breaking it down in terms of like entitlement and what entitlement is and all that. It's like, this is great. It's funny, and I feel like I'm getting smarter. No, I'm all over that.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, that episode was really fun because it's what I had in mind when I started the show, that you could break down a movie psychologically, regardless of the quality of the film. It doesn't have to be Citizen Kane. It can be a just fun action movie with Keanu Reeves not emoting as usual, but there's still something in there, because psychology is really about human behavior, and every movie pretty much has human behavior in it. So that was a lot of fun to actually, because it was, I will admit, it was tough to come up with something for that episode, but I was like, I can do this. Let me figure this out. Let me look closer at it, because I think every movie you can take a closer look and you can find things that you didn't find on first watch. So that was a good time.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. I think that's I think people should definitely check that out. And like I say, it's very funny and it's very smart, and you do feel smarter. It's one of those sort of podcasts that I feel like you could definitely take something from it, and the next time you had a bit of like a wanky dinner party, be like, yeah, guys,
let's talk about Keanu Reeves' action career in terms of psychology.
Yeah.
Yes.
So in Speed,
let me know how that goes.
Yeah, I'll just drop that next time. People are like, have you seen Manchester by the Sea? No. Have you seen Speed?
Talk about a deep movie. Let's talk about Speed. Yes.
That's great. Well, me, I can also be found at First to Last Pod on Twitter, or you can email me directly at fromfirsttolastpodcast@gmail.com. Just like David, feel free to just message me, tell me a show you like, and if it hasn't already been recorded or dipped, we can work it out, and then we can record it. So, David, thanks for coming on today.
Oh, yeah, it was great. I had a great time. Thanks for inviting me on.
Of course, anytime. My name's Sean Fallon. This has been From First to Last. Goodbye.